Ready. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Lauren Williams, and you may know me more so for having competed in the Olympic Games. I've done 3 Olympic Games in track and field, 1 in bobsled. Many of you have decided to follow my Facebook page because of that, but I wanted to update you and let you know that I have transitioned successfully from sport to life after sport. And I found something that I'm very, very passionate about, and I wanted to be able to share that with you all tonight. So what am I doing? I am helping people better organize and optimize their finances. I run a financial company. It's called Worth Winning. And what I do is help people generally in their 20s and 30s better organize their finances, optimize things, and take their finances to the next level. In my journey, I have come across so many different people, and I've learned so many different things from all the different people. And I've built a new team. So in track and field, I had a team. I had an entourage of people that helped me kind of stay organized and be an elite level athlete. And now I have a team of boss chicks that help me be the best financial planner ever. And so tonight I have my homegirl, Chloe Moore, who is also a certified financial planner, joining me. And what we decided to do is that everyone's in the house, they're sheltering in place, they're a little bit worried about financial stuff. Some people are in a situation where their finances are kind of in a rocky road and they're trying to figure out how to survive. And then there's others who have been able to save a lot of money, have been able to build up. They're thinking about things such as home ownership because they're now in a better position than they previously were. And while we're all here, we're all in a position to be getting more education because we can't go out and have a funky good time on a Tuesday night. Why not be getting more education from those of us who have expertise and professionalism in this realm? So tonight, Chloe and I are going to talk all things home ownership, all things real estate. If you have questions, feel free to drop them down in the chat box. We're happy to answer them as we go. And without further ado, I'm going to let Chloe introduce herself, and then we're going to get the conversation going.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chloe Moore, and I'm the owner of Financial Staples, which is a fee-only virtual financial planning firm here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I work primarily with young professionals in their 30s and 40s, mostly tech employees. And so yeah, I'm excited to be here.
All right. So when we think about home ownership, where's the first place that we start, Chloe? What's the one thing that we first need to talk about? I think it's probably like this idea of having a down payment, or what do you think we need to talk about first?
I think just the fact that everyone thinks that they should be a homeowner, and just that renting is throwing money away. Is home ownership really the way to go? I think that's a good place to start.
I definitely think that I've heard the saying all the time, like renting is throwing money away. And I know specifically among people of color that one of the things we've been told quite a bit is that home ownership is the key to closing the racial wealth gap. What do you think about the idea of land and ownership, and this is the thing you absolutely have to do if you want to turn your whole financial situation around?
Yeah, it's definitely true. The racial wealth gap is a huge issue, and it hasn't really improved much in the last 50 years. And so homeownership is one of the primary ways to build that wealth and pass on wealth to future generations. But at the same time, it's not the only way. And so that's something I think we can dive into.
Definitely. All right. So you were just saying that this idea of renting is throwing away money. Is renting really throwing away money? What is the idea that renting is throwing away money, and why would renting be throwing away money versus I'm paying money toward my mortgage, so I'm paying my house down and my equity's building? Like, that sounds like a great thing.
Why is it? I think a lot of people think that when you're paying rent, it's not at the end of the day you could rent for 10 years and you don't own anything. Versus if you own a home for 10 years, you're paying a mortgage. You have to pay interest, but you're building equity in the house. And so, some people might find it surprising, and a lot of my friends found it surprising that I decided to sell my house that I owned for 9 years and I'm renting right now, and I couldn't be happier.
Wait, what? So you are a financial planner. You have all the financial expertise, and you, as a young professional, decided to sell your house, get rid of it, and become a renter. Chloe, don't you know you're throwing money away?
But yeah, it was a really, I mean, it was a really easy decision for me. And the funny thing is, I bought my house in 2009, so it was towards the the bottom of the market when things started to go south. So I got a really good deal for it. I sold it in 2018, so I had a lot of time for it to grow.
So did you sell it for more than you bought it for?
Oh yeah, I definitely did. But that's something.
It's a great real estate investment. We should all buy homes, and we're all going to make lots of money, and life is going to be great. We should be homeowners.
Yeah, but it's like you think that, but once I actually ran the numbers and thought about it a little bit more, I realized like I didn't make money on my house.
Okay, so let's go back and kind of break that down. You said you purchased a home in 2009.
Yeah.
How was the situation? Was the mortgage versus the rent? Were you actually saving money initially? That's one thing that kind of people can think about.
So when I bought my house, I was renting, and my mortgage ended up being about 30% higher than my rent.
Okay, so your mortgage was 30%. So budget wise, you had to make some adjustments. Like, did you think your mortgage was going to be cheaper, or did you know, you knew kind of as you were in the homeowner process, which is too far to go back, or did you already say, like, I'd rather pay more on my mortgage than?
Yeah, I knew going into it that it was going to be more expensive. The principal and interest together were about the same as my rent. But once you added in the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, PMI, because I didn't have 20% to put down, once you added all of that, it ended up being about 30% higher.
Got it. Okay, so now your budget, like you have a lot less discretionary income to spend. Then you need to not fund the home, but furnish the home. So where did that money come from? Because if you were previously living in an apartment, I'm assuming you had like a 1-bedroom apartment, and now you've got a multiple bedroom home. Is that the situation?
Yeah, it was a 2-bedroom, but I at least doubled my square footage when I bought the house.
Okay.
So yeah, it was a process. It took me several years to furnish the house. I never completely furnished it and decorated it because it was so big. but yeah,
so I have all this space. I've got the American dream, but you have an option, and I think this is what we bump into quite a bit. I know I've seen it with clients, is that I got the house, but I forgot about having enough to be able to furnish the house, but I want it right now. I can't have people over and 4 bedrooms be empty, and only one of them or there's nowhere for them to sit, etc. And I think this is where a lot of people end up going into credit card debt. So
yeah, and I have a lot of clients too, and I've seen it time and time again. Clients come to me and they just bought a house, and unfortunately they came to me after they made the decision. But it's like they ended up spending out their entire emergency fund, and so by the time they get into the house, if there's any repairs that need to be done, if there's any furniture that needs to be bought, even just moving expenses, that costs money. The utilities, when you turn on utilities, you have to pay the connection fees. Just like that, if you pay movers, like that costs money. So a lot of people don't factor in all of the different aspects, and beyond the down payment, there's closing costs. And even if you can negotiate some of that as part of the deal, it usually doesn't cover the entire amount.
Okay, so let's go back and make a checklist of kind of all the things you need to be thinking about if you're deciding to jump off the ledge and go into home ownership. So it sounds like we need a down payment. Mm-hmm. We need additional funds for closing costs.
Yes.
We should ideally have an emergency fund on top of the down payment. So once the down payment is paid, we don't want to be at $0 in our bank account.
Correct.
We need to think about furnishing that home. And then you need to make sure that you understand whether property taxes and insurance are going to be included as part of your mortgage or your monthly payment. And if not, additional funds being set aside for that, because that could be a bill that catches you off guard.
And generally, if you put less than 20% down, you're required to escrow, which means that you're required to pay additional amounts in addition to your principal and interest to cover property taxes and insurance. And then your mortgage company pays those bills for you once a year.
Yeah, so let's go back and kind of dive in a little bit more on the down payment, because I think that's the, kind of like where people say is the starting point. That's the thing they kind of see as step one. So saving for a down payment, what are your kind of recommendations for thinking about how to set money aside and like how much to set aside as a down payment for a home?
Yeah, so when I'm looking at home ownership with clients, we talk about, how much can they realistically afford, because that's one of the things when you talk to a mortgage person and you say you want to get pre-approved for a loan, they'll tell you you can afford some astronomical amount.
Girl, all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
So frequently people are like, but I'm approved for, and it's like, just because you're approved for does not mean that you can necessarily afford that amount. And that makes people really excited. You got to be thinking long term because a mortgage is set over 30 years. So,
Mhm.
can I pay this amount over a 30-year period is something you definitely need to be considering as you kind of go through this process.
And also, I mean, just what kind of life do you want to live? Do you want to be house poor? I have most of my clients love to travel. Like that's a huge part of like their desired lifestyle. So if you want to travel, if you want to do things outside of your house, if you want to go out to eat and not have to cook in the house every day or eat ramen noodles, you have to think about those things. And so that's all factored into how much can you realistically afford to continue to save, to continue to live the lifestyle that you want to live and not be house poor.
Okay, all right. So we need a down payment. We need to make sure we have enough of a down payment. Um, as it pertains to like what enough is, I've seen people get, as low as 3%. I think for the VA loans, 5% seems to be pretty typical now, as like a minimum that you can put down on a home. I was always told, 20% as a down payment. So what do you kind of recommend for people as they kind of sift through like bare minimum and, getting a really good down payment?
Yeah, I mean, definitely 20%, at least 20% is the way to go, but I know that's not realistic for a lot of people. So I'd say if you're going to go on the lower end, I still think at least 10%, just because it's a little dangerous to start out with home ownership and not have any equity in your house.
Mhm.
And a lot of times what happens is when you have the closing costs and all the other things that are added to the down payment, and that ends up, you can roll those costs into your mortgage. So once you do that, if you put 3.5% down and get an FHA loan, and then you finance your closing costs because you don't have the money to put down, you end up getting a mortgage that is about the same value of the house, and you have no equity to start. So
All right,
that's
so let's put this into real number terms for people just to kind of like give them an example. So let's just make it round, call it $100,000 house.
yeah.
We know those are far and few between in America nowadays, but there's still a few out there. So $100,000 down, you go with the bare minimum, you put 5% down. That's $5,000 you saved up.
Mhm.
So we're telling you you need to save more than $5,000 because if you only work for a few months and save up that exact amount and then you go off, you're not going to have enough for the closing costs. So then you're going to be rolling those into your mortgage. But on top of that, you brought 5,000 to the table, which means the mortgage company need to bring 95,000 to the table. They're taking on all the risk, and you're taking on very little of the risk if you can't pay the mortgage. On top of that, because you're paying so little down, you're going to have a higher mortgage payment on a monthly basis. If you had instead put 20% down, which is $20,000, you would only owe $80,000. So the mortgage company is one going to look at you and say, "Oh, you've got some skin in the game too. You're a less risky buyer. You're probably going to be eligible for a better interest rate. Oh, you put 20% down. You also are not going to have to pay this extra mortgage premium insurance. Mortgage, yeah, PMI is what they call it. And so that's going to save you money as well. So by simply delaying gratification and saying, instead of just getting my first 5,000 in the bank, waiting until you can save up 20,000, you've now saved yourself money on the PMI. You've also saved yourself money on by getting a lower interest rate, and you're paying a lower monthly payment, which makes it more affordable over time, which gives you some more bandwidth to be able to do other things with your discretionary income on a monthly basis. So, like, what's the reason behind not pulling the trigger as soon as possible? I would say those are the reasons behind like thinking about delayed gratification as it pertains to, do I want to jump off this ledge now, or do I want to wait a year or maybe even 2 years before I get an appropriate amount saved up? I see a question came in here from Shireen. She asked how VA loans for service members can help the down payment for a home.
Yeah, and I don't have too much experience with VA loans, but I think they're very similar to FHA loans, which allows you to put a little bit less down than a traditional mortgage would, which would be 20%.
Right.
And yeah, so I think that's the major thing.
Yeah, the big thing with the VA loan is that you are able to put 3% down. So we were just talking about 5% being the kind of floor for everything else, but you're not given any other kind of discount. So it makes it a lot affordable for you to get your foot in the door, but once again, it's going to be a higher mortgage.
Yeah.
So the kind of drawback is, are you going to be able to afford that over the long term because you were able to put very little down to kind of to get the ball rolling? But other than that, you still have the interest rate that you're going to be subject to. You're still going to have to like build up your equity. So you want to make sure that though it's a low down payment and it allows you to get going and be a homeowner, how can I get my equity up as much as possible? And then maybe at some point refinance my house to be able to get a lower payment because I have more equity in it.
And another thing I wanted to bring up too, just in addition, we've already talked about, just making sure that you can afford the house and that it's a realistic price range for you. And we also talked about just the different pieces that you have to have saved up. So in addition to that, something else to think about is just the recurring maintenance and just repairs that happen. You have things that break. I mean, I had a single family home, so I had yard work. I had a lot of trees in my yard that had to get trimmed each year. I had the bushes and all the shrubbery that had to get trimmed each year. I had gutters to get cleaned. I had a siding on my house, so I had to get it painted within that 9 years. That was at least $5,000 or $6,000 right there. If you have to get your roof replaced, if my hot water heater broke, and so that was $1,000. I had a water leak because I had a 2-story house, and the leak came down from the second floor to the first floor. I had to get that fixed. So, like there's a lot of things that happen. You might have drainage issues. There's so many things that can go wrong. And so you really need to factor in about 1% to 2% of the value of the home each year for maintenance and repairs. So that's a huge thing. And if you have the HOA too, that's another thing to think about.
There's a lot, like the fees just keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. So, and that's exactly what I recommend to my client is somewhere between 1% and 3% as an emergency fund specifically for the house. So that's separate of your emergency fund in case some other kind of poop hits the fan in your life. You want to try to get an emergency fund specifically for the house so you're ready to go. So back in our example, we had a $100,000 house. You want somewhere between a $1,000 and a $3,000 emergency fund to be able to cover the miscellaneous things that come up. And air conditioning breaking, a water heater breaking, like you said, there's a plethora of things. You don't have the luxury of calling the landlord and saying, hey, this is broke. Like, figure it out, landlord. Like, that's all on you when you're the homeowner. And, a lot of people say, my home is an investment. This is a thing that's going to create wealth for me. And those sorts of things. If you really believe your house is an asset, you need to protect that asset, take care of that asset so that it can actually grow and be an asset for you. Not taking care of your home, not spending the money on those little things. When it comes time to sell the house, you're not going to be able to get as much for it as you want it to.
Yeah, that's so true. And another thing to think about too is, like we're women. So, and I know I'm not handy. I was a single woman who had a house. So I had to call a handyman all the time for things. Like I couldn't fix those things myself. But, if you are a little bit more handy, you probably don't have to worry about, as much with the ongoing maintenance. If you can do your own yard work, if you can, fix like little things around the house, it's not going to be as expensive for you, but it's still something to budget for.
Definitely. And I think, like I said, I was bringing up this idea that a lot of people buy the home because they think it's an asset. They think it's a way to wealth. It's a way to build wealth. One of the things that's important about a home is, staying in it over the long term in order to, be able to take advantage of what happens over growth and time. And I think one of the things you mentioned, I think you said your house grew about 4% during the time that you owned it.
Yeah. So I stayed in the house for 9 years, from 2009 to 2018. And so that's another reason why it's good to evaluate things, especially in percentages. Because if you look at the dollar amount that that it appreciated, you think, oh, she made a lot of money. But when you look at it from a percentage basis, my house only increased in value about 4% per year. And over that same time, the stock market increased by 12% per year over that same period of time. So
wait, you didn't become a bazillionaire by owning a home, selling the home. You sold the house for more than you bought it for. You bought at the downturn of the market. And you could have did more. You could have done better if you had just put the money in the market from the gate.
Yeah. And it's like when I think about it, when I really went back and looked at the numbers, the amount that I put down for my down payment, plus all of the maintenance that I spent money on each year, adding that up each year, all the money I've spent fixing the house up to get it, on the market ready to sell, all of those things added up. They equal about what I made on the house.
Yeah.
when I
So
sold.
yeah, that your returns were diminished by the expenses associated with you
Yeah.
actually keeping the house and keeping the asset up to date so that you could sell it. I think
Yeah.
that's what a lot of people, there's kind of like these gimmicky things out here, come to our 1-day seminar, we'll teach you how to buy and sell. And like I said, there's a lot of like just jargon and propaganda around home ownership being the key to wealth. It's not to say that we're trying to convince you not to purchase a home tonight. It's just to be thinking about what is your reason for purchasing a home? Are you going to be in the home for a long period of time? It is not necessarily your asset when you're living in it. Rental property and investment property is a different thing than your primary residence. And to try to create your primary residence as your retirement plan it's not a good idea. You're going to need to save above and beyond the place that you're actually living in. And we're all going to always need somewhere to live. So, where do you want to live? And then what are your other goals? Like you said, if you love to travel, like, why do you need, to be a homeowner? Why not rent? And why not even rent maybe on a short-term lease so you can pick up and go as you please? You don't have to do it just because it's like the next adult thing that everybody is telling you to do. You need to do homeownership because you feel like it's appropriate for you where you are in your life and you kind of want to set up shop somewhere. One of the other things I always recommend to clients is like this idea that you shouldn't be purchasing if you're going to pick up and leave. Like, I only want to work here for 3 years and then I'm going to move to, the other side of the country because I know the job opportunities are better. Don't buy a house if you're planning on selling within the first 5 years of buying a home. It's very, very unlikely that you're going to make money on that house. And it's more likely that you're going to have to pay the realtor fees, like you said, things to get it back on the market, in addition to all the fees you pay to get into the house. You don't have very much principal in it, and you're going to end up coming out as a loss if you sell in the first 5 years of buying. It's highly, highly likely.
Yeah, I say don't buy a house if you don't plan to stay for 7 to 10 years. Yeah, realistically. And one of the things I've talked to clients about too is that it really is a lifestyle decision. When you're looking at your primary residence, it's not an investment. It's really a lifestyle decision whether or not you want to own a house that's your primary residence.
Very, very much so. Let's see, we got some more. We've got home ownership is wonderful. I purchased the home on a short sale and fixed it up. Okay, so let's talk short sales a little bit. I think this is kind of heading toward investment property, or maybe you can maybe this person was purchasing a one-time home, but like this idea of searching for the right home. Short sales is one thing. Can you kind of explain like what that is? And then also foreclosures is another one that people are usually looking for like cheaper ways to buy a home. And then there's also the jargon around like the idea, like I said, like the market is hot right now. I get that all the time from clients. Like it's COVID. Like I need to buy right now because there's never going to be another time to buy. And it was just like in February, it was a great time to buy because Valentine's Day had just passed and the new year had just passed. And it was like this year, the so-and-so, like there's always some kind of rhetoric around, now is the right time to buy. So can you talk a little bit about the idea of like, when is the right time to buy? And then also, what are the short sales and the foreclosures and the other, options for purchasing?
Yeah. So, I think that, the right time to buy is really when you're prepared, when you have the money, saved up to be in a position where it makes sense financially, and when it makes sense for your lifestyle. That's really when it's the right time to buy. And then just even thinking about, I know a lot of people, talk about short sales and foreclosures and things like that. We're buying in areas that are up and coming. Something that you have to think about too, even though your primary residence isn't an investment, you want to make sure it has resale value. And so if you're buying into a neighborhood where, majority of those houses are short sales or majority of those houses are foreclosures, because I've seen neighborhoods where majority of those houses are, what's the long-term value of that house going to be? Even if you do stay for 10 years, are you in an area that's going to appreciate? Are you in an area that has, good schools or, just things that help to increase the value of the home? And another thing too, like the house that I lived in, we didn't allow rentals. And so that actually helped with the home values as well. because our HOA, didn't want to have rentals in the neighborhood because that brings down the value of the house. So yeah, just a lot of different things that you have to factor in.
Yeah, that is a lot of considerations, and I'm glad you brought that up. It's like the type of neighborhood. So if it's up and coming, do you have the time to wait it out for when it actually is coming? Because the up and coming can be like, oh, it's going to turn around in just a couple years, and I'm going to, be able to flip this property and make all my money back, sort of thing. And it could be, a 10-year, 15-year plan, or it could start spreading in the other direction, and the neighborhood doesn't ever really turn over per se. So are you willing to take on the risk that comes with, maybe a lower purchase to wait for that value to be able to increase? And then, like you said, the HOA was a really good point too. I hadn't even thought about that, is that there's so many rules around an HOA. There's, these fees that you're paying. It takes away some of the autonomy you get as a homeowner when you're subject to an HOA fee. But some of them is, like you said, they have a strategy behind it. So we don't want renters because the turnover is there, and the people are not as vested in the property, and they're not going to look as nice, which is going to mess up our resale value. Well, you don't want to buy a house that you're calling an investment house and try to rent it in a place that you find out you can't rent it. Now you're kind of like doing the sneak Airbnb thing, which I actually had experience with recently. It was awful. A young lady was, put something on Airbnb that was not allowed to be rented, and it just turned into a big hullabaloo. I didn't know that, of course, when I rented it, but people are trying to sneak and do those things, and it doesn't always work out. Like, you can end up locked out in the middle of the night trying to get into your place, and there's a lot to consider when you're trying to like cut corners and get around things to be able to force something that doesn't necessarily fit.
And I think some people too, have the thought process that I can buy this house. If I have to relocate, I could always just rent it out. And if you're able to, that's fine. But yeah, just being prepared and knowing, what that looks like.
All right. So we talked down payments. We talked PMI. We talked maintenance. What else do we need to talk as it pertains to home ownership? I think we could probably talk rental a little bit more.
I think, I was going to say too, I think just some of the things to be aware of, like some of the downsides. Mm-hmm. There is an opportunity cost to saving for a house, versus, if you just have that money, that you can invest or save towards, retirement or like long-term financial freedom. And I have a lot of clients, since I work with tech clients, that live in the San Francisco area. Mm-hmm. And, it's like a down payment. If you're wanting to put 20% down on a house, that could be a couple of $100,000 right there.
Easily, yes. New York and California, I don't know how you guys do it.
But yeah, it's like, the price of a house, here in Atlanta or there in Texas is probably a down payment, in some of those areas. So yeah, it's like just thinking about, even if you do make a lot of money, I mean, the time that it takes you to save up, a couple of $100,000 to put down on a house. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to have a $5,000 or $6,000 a month mortgage payment. That's really, a big investment. So yeah, you just kind of have to weigh those options, and make sure that you're in a position to still meet all of your other financial goals. The other thing is like the unpredictable, maintenance. We talked about the maintenance and repairs, and then just the lack of the freedom and flexibility. Like, you can't just get up and move if you want to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are stuck with that thing. So I have a lot of experience with the downsides. And like I said, this is not meant to scare people. This is meant to make you more prepared. So as financial planners, our job is to help you plan ahead, to be thinking about all the things that generally people don't take into consideration, which lead to making poor financial decisions. Buying a home can be a great financial decision as long as you know what you're getting yourself into. The more information you have, the more knowledge, the more knowledge you have, the more power you have to make sure that this is a good decision for you and that's not something that you regret. Now, on my end, I feel like for my clients, I can say like, I've done it all wrong. So I can check all the boxes for you on what not to do. And this is why it's so important that I have these conversations and that I spend a lot of time breaking down like, well, what's your real reason behind this? Because you want to go in eyes wide open as opposed to, I'm doing it because it's the next best thing to do. I'm a grown up and I make money now and I'm putting a little bit in retirement. And so I got to buy a house because I'm tired of renting, throwing money away on rent. We don't want to just.
I know you've had like a little real estate empire over there. So I'd love to hear some of your stories.
Yes. The real estate empire that is imploded. So I have purchased 4 homes in my adult life. I currently own 1 home, and I am so grateful to have kind of, knock on wood, come out on the other side. The current home that I own, so my first kind of horror story there is I owned it outright. So I'm fortunate enough to have planned and to not have a mortgage on that house. Well, what happens when you don't have a mortgage? No one is breathing down your neck every month to pay your property taxes, or every year to pay your property taxes or your insurance. So what happened to me as it pertains to that home is the mortgage, the property insurance lapsed. Not because I couldn't afford to pay it. It was because they somehow did not send me the bill. I got no email, no electronic payment, no phone call, no last notice, nothing. What happened? We had a huge tornado in Dallas last year, made national news. It pretty much destroyed everything between house number 1 and house number 2, like the whole path of where I live in Dallas, everything in between. Like it started where where this home is, and it ended like at another place that I like spend a lot of my time. Like between the 2 places, like everything in between is destroyed. I was literally in the bathtub with a blanket over my head, like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I was so lucky because you can walk 1 block in any direction and there's complete and total devastation. I called the mortgage company to fix a small hole in the roof in the garage. And they were just like, you're not insured. You're not insured by us. And I'm like, yes, I am. I'm definitely insured. Like, what do you mean? I could have lost my entire home in one like fell swoop. Tons, I mean, I'm talking tens of thousands of people around me lost their entire home that same day. And it started right, like, I mean, if I could drop a pin for you guys, like the tornado started next door to my house. And so I would have been out of everything. I paid cash for it. Oh, I'm doing so great. My financial plan is awesome. I would have had to replace everything all by myself because I didn't have property insurance. So of course they got fired as a company. I hired a new one. My insurance was higher now because there was a gap. There was like a 3-month gap between when it had lapsed and when I actually reached out to them. So that's thing number 1 that happened to me. Like I said, there's 4 houses. So I'm gonna try to make the other stories quick. But 1 home, basically I just sold recently, and just the renter from HE double hockey sticks. We're not gonna use the foul language this evening, but after 8 years of living in the home, being a great renter, something must have happened in the renter's personal life that, kind of caused them to go in a different direction. And I asked them to move out. I came back so I was trying to put the house on the market. He turned the keys into the realtor. The realtor called me. He's like, I'm pretty sure he didn't move out. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, the house looks not moved. Like no one left. All the stuff is there still. So I'm like, okay. I happen to be in town at the time this is happening. I go there and there is, feces in the toilet. There's blood on the floor. There's furniture everywhere. There's food in the refrigerator that's rotten, like food all over the count. Like you would have thought that I was like renting in a very low income, impoverished neighborhood. I was renting in a, suburb in Miami. So the lessons that I learned from that situation is 1, make sure you have a proper lease in place. I did not. So this is somebody that I originally had a lease that I did through a realtor and a property manager. I did not have a property manager because I was like, oh, I'm good. After like year 1 or 2, I was like, I can handle this. These are easy people. They're nice. They pay on time. No worries. But what happens when you don't have a property manager? Nobody's checking in regularly on the house. So what did we talk about earlier? Maintaining your house in order to be able to maintain the property value. The house was not being properly maintained. And though I did call and check in and they said everything was fine, everything was not actually fine. I came and I found a ceiling fan duct taped back into the ceiling. They had a landlord. All they had to do was call the landlord. They were too trifling to say, hey, landlord, fix the ceiling fan, because that was my job. It's my job to keep that property in good shape. Nope, they didn't do that. All kinds of repairs having to be made. I spent about $3,000 at the beginning of last year as like round 1 of just getting the house kind of back to a normal livable state. At the end of last year is when I asked the gentleman to move out. came back to the mess. I spent $500 just to get it cleaned. I spent another $800 to get all of his belongings that he didn't want to move out put on the curb. And then there was the fees for, actually getting the house on the market. I held the house from 2004 all the way to 2020, so 16 years. So you're like, woo, you should be swimming in dough, girl. Like that house had to go up, right? It was a good investment. You held on for a really long time. I'm in a very similar situation to Chloe. If I would have put that money in the market in 2004 and just let it ride, I'd be sitting so much prettier than I would, than I ended up as a renter. Because like you said, look at all the things I had to come out of pocket for at a moment's notice, after they all piled up. On top of that, I was just breaking even with the mortgage. Like, so they were paying the mortgage, property tax, and insurance. As long as nothing broke all year, I think I ended up with like $200 or $300, profit, quote unquote. But something always was breaking, or I had to put the hurricane shutters up. Right at the time that it was time for the renter to move out, and I decided to put the house on the market, I had to get a new roof. So the roof was old, it just aged. It wasn't anybody's fault. That's $18,000 in Florida. There was no emergency fund via the renter's money coming in because I was just breaking even. So guess who had to come out of their pocket or their personal emergency fund to cover that roof? Air conditioning unit, which had been on the fritz for quite a while, saved up because I knew it was getting ready to happen. But guess how much air conditioning was? $7,000. Like, this is killing any chance that you could have any profits from anything anyway. Even if I charged them another $500 a month, that would have been what, $6,000 for the year. That would not have covered the AC and the roof, in addition to all the other maintenance fees. So there's a lot that you need to think about, and there's a lot that you can't plan for. I could not have planned for somebody who paid their rent on time every year for 8 years to have left the house in the condition that they left the house in. Those are the kind of things that you cannot just, you just don't know that are happening as it pertains to rental property. So I'll stop there with my horror stories and let you.
I was going to say, in addition to having a proper rental agreement, making sure that they have renter's insurance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Making sure that they're properly insured, because like you said, in a place like Florida, where hurricanes happen, in a place like Texas where tornadoes happen, it's a real risk, that it's small that it could happen, but not until it gets as close as it did to me, to you. Is it like, oh my God, let me go get renter. And renter's insurance is like $12. Like, it's incredibly cheap, and it's worth it. And it helps you as a landlord to make sure that the person is covered. So that's not a risk that you're trying to take on or cover a little bit of for them when they can have it properly covered for themselves. So renter's insurance is definitely a big deal. And then just going through the proper channels. Like I said, one of the things I didn't do was have a property manager. You're trying to cut corners, you're trying to increase profits, it ends up costing you a lot more. There's a lot of things that I would have known about that house well in advance, and I would have been able to plan for accordingly. It would have been a lot easier to raise their rent on an annual basis. I was like, oh, well, they're good renters. They're nice. Oh, and it was just like it's a business. When you decide to do real estate as a business, you need to treat it as a business. And you also need to think about the investment of not just your dollars, but the investment of your time, because it takes time to run a business. You and I spend a ton of time each day in our business, not just doing financial planning for our clients, but also wearing the marketing hat, wearing the compliance hat. There are things that you're going to have to invest your time in if you want your business to be successful. And I think a lot of people jump into real estate saying like, oh, you can just buy a house. I understand how to do that. Lots of people do it. It seems easy enough, and it's going to turn around and it's going to be a great thing for me. It's not necessarily going to work out like that. You need to be thinking about, how much time can I make sure, spend making sure that my investment gets a return, that it gets a proper return based on the information that I know, and how much time can I invest in my knowledge. So, actually knowing what to do, knowing what's a good property to get versus not a good property, that's an investment of time. That's not talking to a friend and saying like, oh, this is an up and coming neighborhood. Oh yeah, and you drive down the block once and you see like, yeah, this neighborhood looks a little raggedy, so it must be up and coming. And then you go buy the house. Like, I've seen things like that all the time where people just kind of take a little bit of information and they try to run with it and say like, this is going to be the next thing that's going to make me rich. In order to really get a return on any investment, you need to invest time. And investment of time is not just, like you said, for the minutes that you're spending on that thing, but it's an investment of time in your knowledge, it's an investment in time in actually making sure that it runs appropriately.
And I think too, there's two components to a rental property. There's the underlying appreciation of the house, so how much the value of the house increases each year, or the property, and then there's also the cash flow. And so, how much are you getting on the cash flow, like on top of what your expenses are each year, and factoring in maintenance and all of those other things. So, I talk to people sometimes and they're like, oh, I have rental property, I'm getting an extra $200 a month. And I'm like, that barely covers maintenance. So it's like, at the end of the day, you're not really making money. So yeah. And it's not all about the dollars, just like I said, when I sold my house, like, I made well over $100,000, or, made well over $100,000. But, when I look at it on a percentage basis, or really factor in all of my costs, I didn't make anything. So yeah, just, percentages are more telling than like the actual dollars.
And it's important to be able to run that math. I think that's, like I said, a lot of times people are just like, it feels like I'm making money, so I'm making money. You need to have someone that can run those numbers if you can't. And you need to invest the time in learning how to run those numbers if you're not willing to pay someone to run those numbers for you. The other thing I would say is like this idea that, like, I didn't know that the gentleman was going to, like I said, turn into, like, the situation was going to turn into what it did. But the other cost that I paid was like the cost of like my health, my well-being in the form of stress. When kind of poop hit the fan in that situation I was just telling you guys about, that was Christmas. I was visiting my grandma that is 90 and in a nursing home, and thinking like I was having a nice visit with somebody who it could be any moment be the last time I'm visiting her. And I get a phone call while I'm having to drive back. Like, I was planning on heading home for the holidays, and I ended up staying in Miami. So that was Airbnb for like a week or 10 days. Like I said, that was at the last minute, begging somebody to come clean the house and to move the things out. This is literally like 3 days before Christmas that this is happening. Nobody wants to do any work at that time. So stress and strain. Now I'm away from my family during the holidays because I'm trying to handle this thing. I'm sad because like I was not expecting to be mistreated by this person. Like, I was kind, I was, a cordial. I didn't, I was not a slumlord. This kind of caught me straight off guard. I was like, where is this coming from? So like, I had like the emotional strain that comes with it. And like, if you have to put a cost to that, like, yeah, that also greatly diminishes what I got to make off of that house.
Yeah. And I think too, so I wanted to shift a little bit into just some of the alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
I know people say, they want to invest in real estate. Part of the reason why, I think that it's a tangible asset. Like, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can see it, like, what it is, versus, when you're thinking about investing in the market, it's kind of, like this mystery, for some people. So, but there are other ways that you can invest in real estate without having to buy like a physical property.
Ooh, tell us more, Chloe. How do we do that?
But yeah, so just like you can purchase, people have probably heard of like index funds or mutual funds, or exchange traded funds, or ETFs, for short. So there are funds out there that invest in real estate. So there's professional managers. They're managing a portfolio of properties, and you're able to participate in that by just investing in those specific funds. So that's a way to kind of get some exposure to real estate without having to actually buy the physical real estate. And then it's liquid, which means you can buy it and sell it on a regular basis. If you have a
you don't have to put your renter out first, secure, what's the person, the real estate agent. You don't have to pay 6% fees. You don't have to let it sit on the market in the middle of COVID while you happen to pay the mortgage. Lord have mercy. Yes, for the record, that's what I would look with my earnings from the sale of this home. Is I went and I put my money in my investment account. And yeah, one of the things that I purchased was what it's called REITs, REIT. It's real estate investment trust. Like you said, that is a type of investment. There, it comes in an ETF form, comes in a mutual fund form. Like, you can own real estate without having to deal with the hassle of having real estate and diversify your portfolio.
Yeah.
One other thing we didn't talk about was taxes. And how all that works as it pertains to. So a lot of people want to purchase a home because they're like, I'm paying too much taxes, I need the write-off. How often have you heard that in your practice?
Oh yeah, that's a big thing. And it's similar to when you have a, like when you have a business, everybody's like, oh, I want to have a business, you can write off all these things. And I'm like, well, in most cases, you actually have to spend the money to be able to write it off. And if you get some big tax benefit, it's because you're losing money.
Right.
And so that loss
Money out is money out.
yeah. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, and I've seen so many, tax returns from clients who have rental properties, and yeah, I mean, they're at a loss each year. Um, so it's just something to think about. And when you have a primary residence, you can write off the interest, and use that as a deduction. But these days, the standard deduction is a lot higher, now. So depending on where you live, and what other things you have to deduct, you might not even benefit from.
Right. Yeah. That 10K ceiling has really changed people's lives as it pertains to, the awesome tax write-off that people think that home ownership can be. So it is something to take into consideration. Is like you said, don't do these things just because you're trying to like screw Uncle Sam, or everyone thinks they're kind of like, I'm working the system and getting all these different things done. And it, like I said, once you do the math, you're not really working the system. Yes, there are some benefits, but you shouldn't buy a house just to say I'm gonna save money on taxes. That's not the reason. You shouldn't buy a house just to be able to say, I'm like I said, I'm a grown up, and that's the home ownership. You shouldn't buy a house just to say that this is an asset that's going to make me wealthier. You shouldn't go with the buzzword of like, this is closing the racial wealth gap and Black people never have houses, so I got to be a homeowner, sort of thing. You need to think about whether home ownership is right for you, and what I need to do to make sure that I am a great homeowner that doesn't regret my financial decision, because it's a huge financial decision when you go to purchase the home, as opposed to, like I said, getting caught in the clickbaity sort of headlines that, or the trendy little terms, cliches that are being thrown out there, and riding the wave with those when it's not something that's necessarily going to put you in the best financial situation.
Yeah, definitely. So I know we're kind of getting to the top of the hour, but just some key takeaways. Did you want to start?
Oh, credit score is one thing. So real life has been commenting over here, and one thing that we didn't mention was the idea of your credit score and how that impacts you purchasing a home. So yes, your credit score is important. You want to make sure that you have a credit score in good place, in good shape. When I say in good shape, I'd say over 700. So another thing I'd also mind you to be aware of, as kind of we talk takeaways, is credit repair companies that are preying upon people. So if you have poor credit, it's likely that you made some, negative financial decisions along the way. What you want to do is start cleaning up those things, and cleaning up mostly on your own. So these kind of agencies will say, oh, we can fix your credit now. We can fix your credit in 6 months. And what they're doing is writing letters to the credit bureaus, trying to get things taken off. If you purchased everything that is on your credit report, it's highly unlikely that anything's going to be taken off. So you might spend 6 months, pay them $100. Now you're out of $600. I've seen people pay like $6,000 to try to get their credit fixed. That's $6,000 they could have paid toward their debt. So be leery of those things, and make sure that you understand that while your credit score is kind of your report card of your finances, if it's not in good shape, you can go item by item and try to get those things back in order. And the best thing to do is to create new financial habits. So it might not be a good time for you to buy a house if your credit is in bad shape, because there's some things you haven't been able to take care of. You want to get your budget under control, make sure that you have the ability to pay a mortgage in addition to whatever your other monthly expenses are, and to start paying those debts down before you take on a mortgage. So not to be duped by the idea that someone can wave a magic wand, undo all the financial mistakes that you've made, but that it's going to take hard work. In the same way that, we gain weight. I was telling Chloe before we started this that I had gained, probably closer to 30 pounds over the last year or so. And at the beginning of the year, I was like, I got to get my life together. And so I've lost 20 pounds since January, which is kind of like embarrassing for an Olympian to say, like, you have a weight problem? What? But it didn't drop off. I didn't do 5 days of working out and some abs and a few Olympic workouts and drop 20 pounds. And the same way that you didn't get into a financial problem overnight, you're not going to get out of a financial problem overnight. So to just hit a button and say, I'm buying a house by the end of the year, and your credit is 500 right now, like, No, you might want to get on a 5-year plan to purchase a home. So
And I would even say too, like it really, your credit score, ideally to get the best interest rates, needs to be in the mid 700s.
yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I would say 700 being the rock bottom. And know that, just like you said, just because you're approved doesn't mean that you're getting the best options that are available to everyone out there. So we've seen it time and time again, especially in low income communities or in communities of color where people are preyed upon by car dealers, and they'll have a car payment of $600 a month, and I'm like, what kind of car do you drive? And they'll be like, a Honda, and I'm like, there's no way, no how. Like, you do not drive a $600 a month car, like, and then they have like a 20% interest rate. So somebody will give it to you even though your credit is not in good shape. You just won't get it at the rate that everybody else is going to get that available to them, and it's going to put you in a situation. It's going to make it really tough. And then you're upside down in a car that you're paying a bunch of money on, or we're talking houses, but same sort of situation. Doesn't mean that you're in the most ideal situation just because someone told you yes. It might be better to wait and end up with a more favorable interest rate, end up with a better credit score, end up with a bigger down payment. Those are the things. Like, delayed gratification goes a really long way in helping you reach your financial goals.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to reiterate too, like there's no right or wrong answer. I know we probably, scared you guys a lot with all of our stories, but at the end of the day, it really is a lifestyle decision, and you have to think about, what's best for your lifestyle. What do you want your life to look like? Just even how purchasing a house or real estate, factors into your lifestyle. Just what other goals do you have that you want to accomplish? And it's buying that house going to allow you to continue working towards those other goals. So yeah, just thinking about all of those different pieces is important.
Yeah. All right. Well, if no one else has any questions, I think we can wrap it up. This was a great discussion on on home purchasing, not financial topics. But we will be covering other financial topics. So we're doing a series. We're going to do this every Tuesday for the rest of the month. Like we said, we want to be able to share all the information that we've learned, because being able to share it with the community and help people make better decisions and help people just not make mistakes sometimes is something that I think is going to pay dividends that, it could change the world, honestly. Like, it can, not just change the trajectory for one person's financial future, but if they carry that information on, they share that with someone else, what they learned tonight, it could actually end up leading to change in the world. And that's what we're trying to do. It's not all about us, gaining clients and, building an empire, et cetera. It's about taking the knowledge and the expertise and the information we have and creating a community that's better off for it. So we're going to do 5 financial myths next week that kind of come up frequently. And people kind of say one thing. Like I said, there's a lot of cliches out there now, and there's a lot of like clickbaity articles and things like that. We want to go ahead and dispel some of those myths. We're also going to talk about, what financial professionals are, what they do, and kind of bust the myths bust the myths around the idea that we're all created the same. So there are all different types of financial professionals. There's different ways you can be serviced, and there's questions that you need to know to ask when you're ready to hire someone. I think a lot of times people don't want to hire someone because they're all going to steal my money, they're all going to take me, they're all like, I don't understand it. We want you to understand it so that you can feel comfortable getting the help you need so that you can optimize your finances.
And then also, when is the right time to reach out to a financial advisor?
Exactly. Yeah. Because sometimes people reach out and they're in a dire situation, and it's like, well, now I'm stuck in a pro bono situation because I don't want to send you on your way without the right information, which is why we do things like this for free. But we also have to make a living with we invested a lot to get this knowledge and this expertise, and we got to be able to charge something for our services, and it's not always a good fit. So we want to make sure people know when is the right time to reach out to a financial professional. And then last but not least, we're going to do Chloe's favorite topic. Like I said, she works with women in tech, and we're going to cover stock options. So a lot of people think that their stock options are free money. Your stock options are not free money. That is a myth. We're going to talk all things stock options because a lot of people are getting them now at the various employers they have, and they're not sure how to use them appropriately. They're not doing their taxes right as it pertains to them. And we want to make sure that you realize that that's a really great employer benefit to have available to you, and how to best utilize those stock options. So tune in next Tuesday and every Tuesday for the rest of the month as Chloe and I share all things financial with you.
Yeah, and if you have questions, just continue to add to the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, like and share it. But yeah, we're happy to continue answering questions after the video is finished.
Yes, and I'm dropping Chloe's website and my website into the chat. So if you guys want to reach out to us, you can find us there. You can also find us, you said, slide into the DMs on Facebook or Instagram. My company is Worth Winning. Hers is Financial Staples. And we will see you guys next week.
Bye.
Uh-oh.